Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the panel on education. We have an esteemed panel spanning primary education, secondary education, and higher ed. So to introduce, I want to introduce the moderator, Manish Ketarpal. Manish was a couple of years senior from my hostel and was an investor in my previous venture. Manish runs Waterbridge Ventures, which is an investor in an academy that recently became a unicorn. Manish is an alumnus of IIT Delhi and Stanford. So Manish, over to you. People are waiting for your session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rohit. Thank you, Rohit, and the team for putting this panel together and asking me to moderate it. Actually, I just start by saying this is fascinating that I have 4 entrepreneurs, kind of people I actually spend most of my time with and I derive most of my energy from. So not only are they all entrepreneurs, they're entrepreneurs in the area of education or intersecting with education. They're all very mission-driven people. So I'm super excited to host this and moderate this. What I'm going to request the speakers to do in the order of, we'll start with Ramya, Loveleen, Saumil, and then Zishan can end this. But please introduce yourself. Short introduction is what we'll start with, and we'll launch to some questions.
Sure. I'm Ramya Venkatraman and founder and CEO of Center for Teacher Accreditation Center Private Limited. We are a 5-year-old teacher certification company and trying to, we basically assess and certify the competencies of teachers, connect them to opportunities, and through that, trying to make teaching a more aspirational profession. Today, working with about 2 lakh teachers coming from 6,000 locations across India and starting a small international journey in the Middle East.
Thank you, Ramya. Loveleen, do you want to go ahead?
Oh yeah, and IIT Delhi batch of 97, I guess we were supposed to say that too,
So my name is Loveleen Bhatia. I am a co-founder of Edureka. Edureka is a skilling platform for students and technology professionals. So we offer short skilling courses as well as long courses in partnership with some of the top institutions in India. I am a graduate from IIT BHU. And before Edureka, I worked for a long time with Texas Instruments in hardware design. I live in Bangalore and I think I spend a lot of time reading poetry. So yeah.
Should I go next?
Yes, Saumil, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Saumil Majmudar. I am the co-founder, CEO of Sports Village. Pretty much sports secretary at campus and hostel, sports counselor, inter-IT sports and all of that, and continue to do sports secretary now since 2003, trying to get kids to play and make the world a better place, hopefully. And my intersection with education happened because after the first 5 years of kind of really flailing around, trying to find different business models, B2C and technology and all that, I realized that unless you integrate with education, you just can't get kids to play at scale. And that's pretty much what we've been doing for the last 10 odd years in building EduSports, which is now back to Sports Village schools. We work with pre-COVID 1,500 odd schools, roughly 50% private, 50% public. We work with brands. We convince CSR donors to invest in sports, and of course, parents and kids. And now with COVID, we went online, live digital classes, trying to find a way to get kids to play COVID or no COVID. So that's it. Otherwise, IIT Bombay, 8993.
Thank you, Saumil. Zishan.
Zishan Hayat. I am the founder and CEO of Topper.com. We are a learning platform for K-12. Between our products, we cover all grades from KG to 12. Our core product is an after-school learning app called Topper Plus. Helps you prepare for your board exams and several other entrance exams. Our other product is a school OS, helps schools run online. So they let them take schooling home. So in between these products, we have about 20 million registered users. And between our free and active users, we have about 35 million active users using the site every month. IIT Bombay, 2000 to 2005, civil engineering, Hostel 5, if anyone cares. Yeah, that's my background.
Thank you, all 4 of you. That's really fascinating and actually quite an eclectic mix. So I'm really excited. There's so much to ask. So if you bear with me, what I'm going to do is I'll ask some targeted questions to each one of you, and they're all different. Then I'll throw in some common questions for everybody in the end. And we do have a Q&A section, and we'll see what the audience throws up. We'll try and pick up some questions from the audience also in the end. I'll actually start with Ramya. Ramya, fairly decorated long stint at McKinsey, I believe a decade and a half, including advising big, small, all kinds of clients. And also you were leading their education sector practice. So if you had to pick a venture in education, I think you had the choice you had a ring fence view of everything. Why did you pick the area of teacher training, and why did you decide to start Center?
Yeah, sure. So I, of course, in terms of interest in education, I had that interest, in fact, pre-IIT. So this is coming from my school days, and I always did bits and pieces of volunteering. Went through a very normal career for 10 years in McKinsey, serving various clients and so on. And finally, around year 10 is when I started feeling the itch to sort of get into the sector. And the next 5 years built McKinsey's education practice. Now, I think that those 5 years were really when I, at least in my view, started understanding the heart of the issue in education. Because till then, I used to feel, okay, why don't we improve our content, or lots of things that you see a little bit from the outside. Now, of course, one thing which people realize pretty quickly working in the sector is that the teacher plays the most important role in quality, even with whatever technology, content, etc. is available out there. And that didn't take long to realize. And and in my work and in other work that I saw, there was a lot of teacher training, teacher support through technology, teacher input on content, etc. that all of us used to do. And what I found is that as a country, we end up trying to either mandate the teacher, saying you need to use all this and improve your practice, and I'm a senior government official or a head of a progressive private school group, and therefore you need to do all this. Or we end up appealing to their conscience as civil society, saying this is good for the future of the country, this is what the next generation depends on, and therefore you need to do all this. And what I found to be the missing piece in all of this is, what is in it for the teacher? So what is the incentive for a teacher to do better than the teacher next door? If everyone's going to have pretty much the same career path, financial rewards, you don't even get a pat on the back or recognition for doing a better job. So this is the specific problem that Center is trying to solve. Incidentally, we are not a teacher training organization. We are a teacher certification company where we assess and certify teachers on their competencies. And we, over time, have been able to create more and more value for that certificate. So today there are thousands of private schools around the country who value that certificate in recruiting, promotion, etc. There are 15 or 16 state governments which have actively encouraged their teachers to participate and done some informal rewards for teachers who do well. One state government has formally adopted Center as part of its promotion policy for teachers. We now have some schools outside India, Middle East, Southeast Asia, etc., who are starting to recruit teachers from India based on Center, because again, global mobility is a big part of making a profession aspirational. So that's the gist of what I wanted to solve at the end of the sort of 5-6 year education part of my McKinsey stint. And yes, end of 2014, finally decided to leave after 15 and a half years, and started Center in 2015 in Bangalore. So yeah, that's the reason. I don't know if I directly answered your question,
no,
but
you did.
yeah.
You did. That's a fascinating story. Thank you for sharing that. Actually, we'll stay with you, Ramya. It's I was thinking it's a very contextual topic and time, right? Given what you're doing, we had a teacher from Maharashtra who won $1 million, the Global Teacher Prize, just last night.
Yeah, incidentally, a member of the My Center community as well.
Oh, how amazing is that? Congratulations.
Yeah,
congratulations.
We're all very thrilled about that. Yeah.
No, that's wonderful news. And one of the things that probably comes to mind, right, as an education investor, students are celebrated and platforms are celebrated and products are celebrated, but teachers aren't as often celebrated. And a challenge that one has to think about is in the new paradigm, how are teachers coping with it? So maybe we'll stay with you, and a question that I wanted to ask you in this post-COVID world that we are dealing with, where so much paradigm shift has happened. Yes, for learners also, but how are teachers coping with it? Or what are some good business models of, really working effectively in a post-COVID world, and how Centa addressing that problem as you are certifying teachers and helping them prepare for this new paradigm?
Sure, sure. So what is happening very interestingly, and frankly, when the COVID lockdown happened, we had no clue how this is going to affect our business. And I mean, the first thing we did is, okay, let's just cut cost drastically because we don't want to be caught unawares. So we sort of did that. But in 2-3 months, we suddenly found that the amount of engagement of teachers on our platform, like the usual daily active users, weekly active users, and all, are skyrocketing. And we tried to understand what's going on. And what we found is that COVID has actually created a very interesting time for this profession, because suddenly the most valuable resource for a school has become the teacher who is directly facing parents, because parents are in the background while classes are going on. Teachers are now live in the living room or study room or wherever. And for the first time, parents and society more broadly don't find the classroom to be a black box. And they are able to see that in the same branded school where I send my child, there is one teacher who's really good and one teacher who's not so good. And that difference makes a big difference compared to whatever tech and content they are using. So very interestingly, we found that the uphill journey that Centa has been on, which is to say that teachers play the most important role, and you should ask for whether your child's teacher has a Centa certificate. Interestingly, COVID became a big impetus for that. And with the visibility that teachers got, when parents started asking for it, schools started feeling that, okay, now I need to say something special about my teacher. All the online teaching growth that has happened, most of the online teaching players today recruit from the Centa platform, because their student-facing work, yes, they have a great base with their students, but then they want to find quality teachers, so they end up recruiting from our platform. So I would say that this is, in some ways, the best time to be a teacher with this kind of dynamic that is happening in society. And of course, tactically, there are challenges. I mean, teaching online, not meeting your students in person, not knowing much about the technology you're using, those are tactical challenges. But the skills are not hard to learn. So we ourselves run this like 1.5 week rapid upskilling on online teaching. So we do some amount of work on the training side, and thousands of teachers are sort of going through that. And it's not rocket science. I mean, it can be learned reasonably quickly. Now, of course, we all hope we'll be able to get back to a more physical world, because this seems pretty unsustainable in every way. But I think when we get back to that physical world or blended kind of model of education, which might continue to a certain extent, I do believe that the spotlight which has come on teachers should hopefully continue. And all those parents out there who have learned that the teacher plays the most important role will now hopefully go back to the school and start asking more about the quality of teachers, rather than looking at only the infrastructure, etc. So it's a very, very interesting time for the profession in spite of the tactical challenges.
That's very interesting. How teacher as a stakeholder will become more important, driven by this crazy pandemic. But that was a very, very interesting perspective. Ramya, we'll come back to you in a bit. I think where you ended this response, it's a nice segue to pick this up with Zishan. Zishan, now Topper and Byju's, I think most of the audience, if not everybody, knows how the two companies have created massive scale in creating amazing content and selling that content and that education beyond school, so beyond supplemental, in the form of supplemental learning, and also what you're doing with test prep, K-12 leading up to examination, test prep, etc.
Yeah.
Would love to ask you what, if you were to take a step back, what has been that one significant challenge for you, like that really comes top of mind from today's context? And also, while you're talking about that, address some new frontiers in K-12 education.
Yeah. So I think the challenge in education remains trust. So parents trusting a particular solution for their kids' learning, right from school, picking a school, getting access to that school, picking after school teacher, ensuring results from that after school teacher, sending them to a coaching class, tuition center, trusting. Basically, trust plays a very, very important role in education. It's because there is, you can't hedge your kids' education, right? It's not like ye bhi kar lo aur wo bhi kar lo. You just have one option. So I think all companies, so you have to solve for content, you have to solve for teachers, you have to solve for technology, you have to solve for product, user experience, all of that. But I think one fundamental thing that you definitely have to solve for, and it's not very obvious, is solving for trust. So that's been a persistent challenge. We are a 7-year-old company, but we still have to every day solve for trust. It's never an easy problem to solve, right? Because trust takes years to create, and then one bad incident to shatter, and that has reasonable effect in the circle, right? One bad experience with one student and 10 students lose trust. So that's, I think, one persistent challenge for all education entrepreneurs, building on the consumer side. In terms of new frontiers, I think the last 5 years were all about taking after school learning and taking it online to a reasonable extent. So 5 years ago, after school learning was predominantly coaching classes and tuition centers, right? Online was a very, very small part. 7 years ago, you didn't even hear of online as an after school option. But I think today, after school learning is split between coaching centers and online learning platforms to a reasonable extent, reasonable market share. I think the next frontier is in unifying your in-school learning experience with after-school learning experience. Even today, these are disjoint sets. What you learn in school is completely a black box, and after-school programs, whether it is online or offline, coaching class hai, ya Topper, Vedantu, an academy, they are all like, this is our learning path, follow our learning path, which is independent of your school's learning. And schools are completely unaware of what is being taught in coaching classes or what students are learning on apps, whether they are already ahead of what is being taught, whether they are behind, how can we help, how can we collaborate. So I think that boundary has to, at some point, if you think of it from a student's perspective, I'm the stakeholder here, right? I am actually the customer. I am the one who's paying both the parties to receive something. And if my suppliers are not collaborating, then it's not fun for me. So I think at some point we have to unify this in-school and after-school learning experience. That's the next frontier for all technology companies.
That's very interesting, and I want to stay on you and on this subject. What do you think will be the catalyst for this, unifying this in-school and after-school or outside of school learning? Because you really took a student stakeholder approach, and you're right, that's how it's going to evolve. But who's going to be there, and what's going to be the catalyst?
So I think the catalyst was released in the last 6 months. So schools are notorious for being tough nuts to crack when it comes to technology, right? So you can bring the best technology to the school's door, but it will be super hard to implement anything within the walls of school, and it's a known fact. I think in the last 6 months, they've been they have opened up to using tech, right? Of course, the initial solutions are all going to be patchy, right? So somebody used Zoom, somebody used Google Meets, somebody used Microsoft Teams, some schools use custom platforms. But I think at least what they did was open up the doors, open their minds to using tech, number one. The second thing that happened is teachers were force trained for almost 200 plus days on technology. I don't have a problem with students. See, today's students are all digital natives. They were born after 2005. So all of them are used to a computer being connected to internet, most likely being a touch screen, and having multiple devices at home. So they're all digital natives. So you don't have to teach technology to them, right? They are learning technology from age 2. It's the teachers who needed this training, and they have been force trained. Whether they like it or not, they have been trained, and it's not a 7-day training. It's a 200-day real life training, on the job training. So I think these two factors, schools opening up a bit or creating a gap, and teachers being force trained, is the catalyst that will see many tech solutions for schools come up in the next 10 years. And therefore, I think we will start this unification of in-school and after-school learning.
That's super. That's super.
In 5 years, I would be surprised if I don't see APIs where I should be able to say, hey, schools, here's what your student learned on my platform. Whether you want to use it as a public profile, please, pick up the scores and pick up the progress and figure out what you want to do at school.
That's
and same thing, right? I want to,
or it could happen the other way around as well.
Or it could happen the other way, right? I want to fix only the gaps.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. I think I'm going to come back to you on this one. I think this would be an interesting jump into what Saumil is doing, because we started to move from teachers to students to now holistic learning for school students, right? And this is where sports and extracurricular, the non-academic stuff also fits in. And Saumil, you started Sports Village, I think, a while back, 14, 15 years ago, maybe even longer. So you've seen the evolution of how this really played in the minds of student as a B2C customer, but also with schools as a B2B customer, and then B2B2C. Walk us a little bit through, this journey of how sports has evolved as being one of the tenets of holistic education in schools, and how Sports Village really playing a role in this.
Well, thanks. I think a lot of interesting comments from Ramya and Zishan. I think a lot of intersections with the stuff that we have been experiencing in the journey. So just to reset, we started this journey of around getting kids to play back in 2003, and the school's light bulb really lit in my mind only in 2008. Before that, we tried all kinds of stuff, B2C, apartment complexes, app, and all kinds of stuff. And if I look at my journey in the 2009, 8-9 context, where I spent hours waiting outside principals' cabins and still not getting a meeting. And finally, my head of sales told me, the visiting card पे तेरा degree लिख दे, BTech IIT Bombay, MBA IIM Bangalore, वो फिर लगे भेज तो meeting मिलेगा, और meeting मिला. So we had to do all kind of stuff to just get attention. And I remember the principal meeting me saying, तुम कर क्या रहे हो, मतलब, why are you here in sport? Because they thought they were selling a bat or a ball or So there's a very different construct of sports in schools, which is done by the PE teachers, pretty much the lowest priority, and so on and so forth. So 2009 it was really why sports? Why should it be structured? Why should it be part of education? And I had to lean a lot on my academic background to say, a lot of people think it's good, so you should also think it's good. And really, I was selling, the IIT name, if you will, to convince them that, look, you should think about this for a minute. 2015, if you think about it, just fast forward. And from then on, it's not been about why sports, it's about how sports. That हाँ करना तो है, अब कैसे करे बताओ, आप कैसे करते हो? How do you make it inclusive? How do you make it age appropriate? How do you make sure there's progression? How do you assess each child? How do you make sure parents see the value? How do you see stakeholders see the value? What is the definition of success? By default, the definition of success back in 2009, and in many schools even today, was my school team is winning medals, therefore my sports program is good. So my always example would be, okay, so 5 of your kids got to IIT. Doesn't mean your maths class was good. No, it doesn't. Those kids would have gone to IIT anyway. What is the measure of the maths class is what the entire class as a group, has it moved ahead year on year? How are you assessing on a very democratic parameter and not a very exclusionary parameter called participation in school team? Because school teams only 40 kids in a class school of 1,000, which means from parents' perspective, by the way, it means that 96% chance that your child is getting nothing from the school sports program. Only 4% chance that the child is a sports program, just mathematically, right? So that has changed significantly. I mean, 2014-15 was the time when Satyamev Jayate showcased EduSports as one of the programs of how do you, at scale, get kids to play. So that has changed significantly. I think also with the one other piece, Manish, was that I think one important construct maybe is there in some of the comments that Ramya and Zishan made, where two things. One is around teachers and second is around the child. I think in the focus on adults' learning outcomes in education, we have ignored the child's goals of fun and engagement. Children learn when they're having fun and then they engage. Adults want to teach because there are metrics and goals and so on and so forth. And that intersection, there has to be some kind of a gap. There has to be some kind of transition between the two. Otherwise, we are both talking two different worlds. And if I think of the COVID context, we know obviously we are talking to schools because we want schools to hopefully open up soon and our business gets started again. And schools are saying, बच्चों को पूछा और बच्चों ने पूछा कि अच्छा जब स्कूल ओपन होगा तो गेम्स पीरियड होगा क्या? But as per the current norms, games period are not allowed. तो स्कूल ने बोला नहीं, गेम्स पीरियड अलाउड नहीं होगा. तो बच्चों ने बोला हम नहीं आ रहे वापस. Right? They said we'll tell our parents कि we don't want to come. Now, I think it's very important. Kids are voting with their feet. They are saying this experience sucks. They're saying that in their own way because they don't have agency otherwise. So I think this whole notion of education, which is a very opaque, market, if you will, or I may refer to that as a black box, where the customer who's a parent is paying for an experience with the consumer who's a child who's getting, but both of them don't have a common language to say, did I get what you paid for? Was the quality good? Was the experience good? There's no common language to exchange that because child doesn't know what he's supposed to get. Parent has a view of what he's supposed to get. And there's this on the teachers front as well. I mean, we started a program back in 2009, Manish, with this very nice idea that scalable karenge, technology denge, content denge. Okay. And I still remember meeting this after a lot of effort, finally meeting on principal in Hyderabad. And this lady looked me in the eye and said, who are you going to send as a trainer to execute a program? I said, Madam, aapke 5 PE teacher hai, main kyun banda bhejun? We thought it'll be 5 of us sitting in a room, reading data and content, doing some analytics and, technology, and we'll scale and we'll change the world. And she looked me in the eye. I said, I'm not going to send anybody, I'll train you guys. She looked me in the eye, honestly, in 2009. I still remember, hot Andhra Pradesh afternoon. And she said, Mr. Soumil, I like what you're doing, but I hope you succeed. But if you want your program to work, please hire and send your own guy or girl trainer. Otherwise, this is not going to work. Therefore, I think the notion of scalability in education, at least in the K-12 context, B2B context, came in, I think, has to come after sustainability. Is your program sustaining to renew the interest, to engage and deliver the service? And that's where a teacher comes in. We ended up by March this year earlier, we had almost 2,000 people on our team who are actually training and delivering the program on the ground. But the scalability to sustainability, if I went to the scalable side, which is the classic, all of us know that word, then I would have gone on a very different path. So I think
there's been a bit of a teach the trainer is what you're saying. That is how you have.
No, we delivered. We have actually our trainers on our own roles. We deliver it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the program wouldn't have worked. My point is, in education, if you want to scale, you have to embrace the whole thorny problem of the teacher. Otherwise, at least we are not seeing it in the sports context. Other program might be working.
And just to extend this, if you had to pick one massive behavior change in payability or looking at sports as being more important in the overall holistic learning landscape, where has this come? Like the biggest behavior change in the last 15 plus years?
So
it's in the school administrators, teachers, students. You said it's students driven. Students always have enjoyed learning with fun. But have you seen any major change in the last?
Yeah, see, finally, school administrators respond to what parents demand. And some parents are activists, some parents are not. But finally, that's the market, right? So that's what they're responding to. If you think of sports as the intersection of preventive health, physical, mental wellness, and education, it's kind of an intersection of all of those three. Over the last 10, 12 years, I think that focus on health, wellness has increased a lot more than it was, including mental health now. And the notion of sports and play being a fundamental construct of education experience and fitness as a construct of well-being and so on has increased. And therefore, it is now becoming, how do I do sports for all kids and not why do I do sports for all kids?
Interesting. Now and I think COVID and this time would have had a lot of parents and all the stakeholders reflect on this, and we'll see what it evolves into. That's very helpful, Somil. Loveleen, thank you for waiting patiently. I know we went pretty deep in K-12, academic, non-academic, and then of course, teacher certification. You're obviously working when well-trained students from K-12 system come into the higher education system and the system of skilling and training and finding better jobs and upgrading their jobs. I think Edureka plays a fairly meaningful role there. Maybe if you'd help share a perspective on the thesis behind Edureka, like what is the gap that you're trying to solve for?
Sure. So I think, see, fundamentally, higher education, right, in India or elsewhere, has always been about selecting the best students and then helping them connect to employers or maybe take them to the next higher education, right? So that has been the real thing happening all across, right? Now, what is really needed, and the other thing which the challenge which a lot of higher education companies face is they've spent so much money, right, on their formal education, right, and in that age asking their parents again to invest, right, is a challenge. Professionals also, when we started out at Edureka, professionals thought, why do we need to learn more? We are already doing a job, right? And things had not really, new technologies had not really started coming in, right? So I think that was the first thing. The need itself was not there, right, in the minds of the students, right, or the professionals. So I think that was the first thing which we had to figure out, that what is the demand, where is the demand, how do we generate the demand, right? And I think second thing which was very important, Jishan pointed out, right, and I believe this is the most important thing in education, is gaining the trust of the consumer, right? What happens is that, especially in the higher education, right, most people feel cheated about the education quality. They go to a college and they're not very happy with what happened to them. Their experience for most of the people has not been really up to the mark, right? And they're really apprehensive to invest further in education, right? So that's one fundamental thing where people want to be very, very careful about, and then they end up trying a lot of ways of learning free online, maybe go to YouTube, right? But the challenge is that, I mean, as everyone pointed out, right, it's not just the content which helps you, right? Teacher becomes a very important part. The support which you're getting is very important part. Hand-holding is needed, right? So that entire pedagogy is the thing which helps you, right? So you're not just spending money, you're spending your time also, right? And which is a very big value for professionals. So I think that's the basically the challenge. That's where we started, right? And I think in my view, there are 2-3 trends which are emerging in the higher education space today, right? One is low cost, or say reasonable cost degree programs, right? Now with the new education policy, as well as the foreign universities coming in, right? Low cost degrees, and while delivering high quality outcome, right? And which is really possible with online, right? Earlier, the challenge which a lot of these technology specific courses faced was that how do I get a teacher who can say, teach me analytics, right? Now that's not the challenge. You have a huge pool of people who are working professionals who are ready to spend their time in teaching, right, online. So online brings that, makes that easy, right, from a delivery standpoint. So that's one, right, low cost deliveries, low cost degrees. The second thing is, I think, the outcome based job tech kind of programs, right? Now all our colleges, right, and when I talk about Edureka, it's largely technology schools, right? They've always been that I will give you this degree, right? But there's no outcome. There's a placement cell, you will get something, and but it is not. It's not really a function of what you learned. It is just a function of where you were and how many companies came and what you did outside of that. So I think essentially outcome-based programs will, whether they lead you to your first job or for working professionals, it's a career shift, right? So those are, I think, the two key areas where I believe there's a big emerging trend, right? And I think the regulatory systems have also opened up, right? But I think essentially in both these things, in the online education space, in the long run, you can only create value if your pedagogy can really move you from point A to point B, right? I mean, and not just give you some degree or certificate, right? If you can really achieve that, and which is not an easy thing, because like going to a gym, right? Education requires an effort from your side. You cannot just buy and learn things, right? So you have to put in your effort, and it is not an easy thing to learn and keep being persistent with that. So I think that's the other thing, right? And I think once if there can be multiple players who can achieve that, we can help students with that. And the other thing which will change over a period of time is the way employers treat these online degrees and programs, right? So if and when, right, I'm sure it will happen very soon, that employers will start treating these programs at par with the offline degrees and programs, right? So once that starts happening, then I think there'll be a step jump in the demand for these programs, and we are already started seeing that, right? And the good thing is that there are a lot of players now in the market who are educating the consumer, right? So so that's I think that's a very good thing today. A lot of people are working on this. Unlike earlier days when we started out, there was hardly anything, and both Coursera, Udemy, and all started after we started out. So I believe in the next 2-3 years, this online higher education will really become mainstream. And this decade, I believe, last decade was spent on educating the learner, making people believe that this is possible. This is the decade when you'll see these degrees and programs becoming mainstream. And really, this will change not just as a business, right, as a business outcome for the entrepreneurs, but also as an impact. There will be a big impact on the quality of education which is getting delivered, right, which was not really possible due to the constraints of being offline. So I think this is how we are looking at it.
That's quite exciting. Just a quick thought, a quick response on where do you see opportunities, interesting opportunities in this online degree and online learning in higher ed? Of course, some companies like Great Learning and others have now shown some degree of scale, but where do you see opportunities?
So I think, as I said earlier, right, so I see opportunities in two specific areas. One is, again, this online degrees, right? That's very clearly a path forward, right? A lot of people learn online. There's an existing market. A lot of people learn offline. There's an existing market. Moving it online will not be a big challenge once people start getting the learning outcomes, right? So I see a big opportunity there. Second, I think I also see a big opportunity in creating programs which can really help you in a career shift, right? So whether it is a short program or a long program, if these programs can help you in a career shift, then I think I see these two as a large opportunity space in the next few years.
Super exciting. Lots of ideas, food for thought for new entrepreneurs also. I'm going to shift to actually Zishan. Zishan, your space is talked about a lot, especially in the last year or so. Maybe it's billions of dollars of funding that has gone in this space, or the acquisitions, or at least few scale companies. There could be a mix of all of those reasons. How do you, as a, if I may say so, you were an early spotter of this opportunity, right? And Topper has achieved a fair good degree of scale. And it is a large market, I understand that. But in all that competition, as a more growth entrepreneur, how do you think about just getting better and staying course and growing? And again, like getting better from a business model and economics point of view. How do you treat competition and noise and a lot of capital? Any advice there for growth entrepreneurs?
Okay. It's a very, it's multiple questions in one question. Let me see if I can unbundle it. Look, I want to take 2 steps back. So India has seen 3 massive consumer internet markets, right? So the first consumer internet market was e-commerce. So I would say 2005 to 15 was the decade to build e-commerce. And after 15, it has been like okay, let's settle the debate kind of an era. But the era to build e-commerce was 2005 to 2015. 2010 to 2020 was the decade for cabs and on-demand delivery. So essentially on-demand deliveries, right? Whether it was cabs or food, or I think that was the decade. And now you have like 4 big players emerged: Ola, Uber, Swiggy, Zomato, and that's like again a settling debate. I think the third large consumer internet category is now education. So 2015 onwards and all the way to 2025, maybe 30, you will see this play out. And like all large consumer internet categories, this is a space for at least $30 to $50 billion of market cap creation. Right? So, and it's totally possible because education overall in India is a $100 billion industry, about $60 billion in school, $40 billion after school. So a $100 billion industry usually can warrant a $1 trillion market cap, right? Like, but you have zero or like close to $0 billion companies today in education, public. So I think we're just right in the middle of this consumer internet category creation. And there is a lot of space for pretty much everyone. So then it comes down to, okay, what are you building? I don't think there's going to be lack of space. It's going to be, what are you building? So I think few things that you really have to take care of are, one, you have to stay focused on your customer and protect your customer. So think if your customer is a student / parent, then you have to be obsessed about your student and your parent. And then other stakeholders, which is teacher, school. So like that ecosystem of around your customer, right? So I think obsession with that, definitely. And then the second hat is when you take off your product manager / builder hat and put on your business person's hat, you have to think about margins. Usually what happens is when you go to single-digit margin space, like if you want to build something in 5% margin, 10% margin space, there the temptation to go negative margin is very high. Like what happened for most of the e-commerce run was they operated at negative gross margins. That is like selling a 100 rupee note for 95 rupees. If I want to sell a 100 rupee note on Amazon for 95 rupees, I can have a long line of customers. So the temptation to go negative margin is very high. And therefore, avoiding that temptation, staying healthy on the margins and building with that. I think what happens when you go negative, when you operate at low margins is your product is no longer the moat, capital becomes the moat for the business, right? So whoever has more capital wins. Luckily in education, you can't go negative. You can go negative margin in education also, but like you can't sustain negative margins in education. Also in education, there is a signaling of dropping price, right? Like if you cut the price too much, there is a signal that, okay, you're probably a poor quality product and therefore you're so cheap, right? So same schools delivering same outcomes, the one priced higher is usually perceived as a better school. That's the unfortunate reality. So yeah, I mean, these two things, obsession with...
Interesting. So large market opportunity still that excites you, and then stay true to customer obsession, which Amazon talks a lot about, and of course, protect your margins. And I guess not get bothered by noise. Noise is that the cycles come and go.
Cycles come and go. I've seen $5 billion companies disappear overnight. So cycles come and go. Nothing is certain. So it takes very long to build something valuable.
That's very good advice. Excellent. Listen, I'm also trying to oscillate between my questions and then some audience questions. And I see a few questions popping in. Maybe I'm going to switch to a question from Shailendra Mundra. And he's asking about, maybe Loveleen can take a first crack at it. He's asking about, are there ventures or are there interesting models in vocational training, but keeping Bharat in mind? Not the top 10 metros, keeping Bharat in mind. Are there models for vocational education? Loveleen, you can start, and if anybody else wants to chime in, please do so.
Sure. So I think you see the first cycle has been for metros, right? I mean the people who are getting jobs. IT was the first frontier where we ventured, but I think there is obviously a big opportunity beyond IT also, right, for vocational trainings and a lot of people who are who do these diplomas or who do the ITI or a GTI kind of a course and then get into a vocational job, right? So I think there is a big opportunity there as well. There also the systems are quite broken, right, and they are ready for disruption. I think if companies can take that online, the other thing which is there is although no company has really been able to crack that, but the language learning has been one of the things, right, which is a need, right, and there's a demand for that, right. So I believe the vocational training for the tier 2, tier 3 towns, it's a big opportunity. I'm sure some companies are doing it right now, and in the next few years, it will become more mainstream. We'll get to hear more about those companies. And this whole ITI and GTI kind of a market, right, which a lot of people opt for after their, say, class 10th, class 12th, right? I mean, that's, or maybe some people drop off from school and then go for a ITI, learn a mechanical course of becoming a mechanic or an electrician, and then get into that role, right? So I think that's a big opportunity, and it may not be completely online. It will be a hybrid kind of a thing. But I think there's a big opportunity ahead for a lot of companies to get there.
Manish, if I may?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sishan.
Yeah, Sishan, go ahead.
While on Bharat, I want to clarify, Bharat is not classified by geography at all. It would be like a big mistake if you assume that tier 2, tier 3 is Bharat. There is a bigger Bharat in Sakinaka and Kurla than Udaipur, Jaipur, Jaisalmer, Jodhpur combined. Much bigger Bharat, right here in Sakinaka and Kurla. There are more Porschas per capita in Udaipur than Bombay and Delhi, easily. So it's a very big misconception that, you know, Bharat stays in tier 2, tier 3 towns. No, Bharat stays in the cities actually. And India one stays in, you know, really nice cities like Udaipur in their large villas and Jaipurs and outskirts of Jaisalmer. So let's not mistake. Yeah. There are a lot of Louis Vuitton bags around Jaisalmer.
It's all heterogeneous, just like our languages.
It's definitely not by tiers. It's by incomes. Yes, for sure. Is India like a very high income disparity country? Of course. Do we have a lot of work to do on per capita incomes? Of course. But yeah, let's not. I think the young entrepreneurs should not get confused that, okay, let me build for Bharat, so therefore go to tier 2 and tier 3 town.
That's a very good point.
Manish, on the vocational piece, couple of things. We do some work on. We are a vocational training partner as part of the NSDC program. We work with almost 600 odd government schools. Where 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, the government funds the vocational program. We do it for physical activity and sports, of course, but there are, you know, courses across beauty, wellness, and IT, and so on and so forth. So it's a fairly robust program that's gone all over the country. Second, NEP, the new education policy, specifically recommends vocational training. So I think while we see vocational as something that happens after school or after you graduate from school or college, a lot of vocationalization is being recommended and is kind of being pushed by CBSE and other boards from a 9th standard onwards. So there are very different opportunities coming there because schools don't know how to deal with that vocationalization, because that also has a very different connotation. Parents interpret vocational very differently, you know. So, but even on the school side, there's a bunch of vocationalization going on.
And that's a fair point too. Thank you for sharing that. I'm actually switching gears. This is a question for all of you. And Ramya, we can start with you. We'll go in the same order as we started the introductions. Is there that one wish list, top of the wish list ask from the regulator? And this is putting your own business's hat, your own entrepreneurial hat. If so, what would be that ask from the regulator? Each one of you, if you can share one thing that you want the regulator to solve or do tomorrow.
So interestingly, and you were asking Zishan about a catalyst. And when Zishan said the catalyst has come in the last 6 months, I thought he was referring to the national education policy. So interestingly, I actually, wearing a center hat, as you said, we find the national education policy to be super interesting. And the chapter on teachers in particular, in many ways, it reflects exactly what we believe in, what we are pushing for. So careers of teachers being based on competencies and competency testing, with, of course, the government side being more sort of directed, while the private side will always have a certain flexibility, but being encouraged to do that. The other big thing on the teacher front is the whole idea of alternate programs getting certified or alternate certificates being accepted in place of a B.Ed. which is going to play out in the next 5-7 years. And so in fact, we ourselves have launched this thing called a postgraduate certificate program for teacher preparation in partnership with Manipal University. And in many ways, it's a seeding of what the national education policy is trying to do, which is university-housed, high-quality, scalable programs. And to that extent, my big ask would be, and I don't want to call it an ask actually, because that sounds like I'm on another side. Rather, I would say my big push and support would be to say, how do we implement this? And we hope to be, we are in conversation with many of the concerned people, and we hope to be part of that implementation. And we are very excited about what the policy is saying. So on the teacher front, we absolutely think it's the right direction, and we need to go all out on implementation. I just want to add one more quick thing, Manish, even though it's not strictly related to my entrepreneur hat, but on this previous point about curriculum, also raised by Shailendra Mundra, and you asked a part of that. Again, I think the interesting thing is that a standard curriculum has limitations for everyone. It's not about Bharat or India or urban, rural, rich, poor. It has limitations for everyone. And therefore, an interesting thing in the policy is the flexibility that is coming up, at least starting from grade 9, which I think can give huge impetus to the kinds of things that Saumil and Edureka, Loveleen are trying to do, and Zishan, of course, wants to sort of integrate all of that into an edtech model. I think it can give huge impetus to some of that.
Very sensible. So lots of good things in NEP 2020, but like always, back to what will implementation bring. Saumil, Zishan, quick comment on that top of wish list.
Well, I have three quick things. One is, most of you might not have noticed this, but sports is under an 18% GST regime. So it's actually luxury good. And even sports in schools is an 18%. So that's a clear, and this happened a few years ago. So and that's clearly stressed the whole business model and everything else. On a more regulatory side, I think the education piece, since we're part of the education panel, I think this lot of focus has happened in the last 8-10 years on learning off play. CBSE has got tech cards and a lot of stuff around Khelo India, Fit India, which is about learning off play. I think, and the NEP talks about that, learning through play, where you are able to actually effectively combine the fun and engagement that kids are craving for with the adults' objectives of learning outcomes. And the learning through play, and in fact, NEP refers to it, play-based learning as a specific activity. So I think that is one important execution. And I'm part of a bunch of the government curriculum reform committees, National Sports Education Board, where again, this is getting the attention I think it deserves. The action, of course, has to still happen. The last part, as a B2C level, and to all of us as consumers, is a very fundamental notion of getting a safe place for my child to go and play right next to my house. I shouldn't have to buy a multi-crore apartment to get a small playground where I can go and play with my child. That is the government's job, to give me a safe place to play.
Interesting.
Very interesting. Large infra problem to crack on that. Zishan?
Yeah. So no, I don't have a specific ask. Like all internet entrepreneurs, I want to be an ostrich when it comes to regulators. So I have a very broad ask, which is if the lesser the regulation, the better, till we solve certain things over the next couple of decades. But the broader ask is to have a simplified GST and maybe like a lower rate somewhere between 12 to 15%, or like start with 15 and create a roadmap of saying, over the next 10 years, we'll get to a 12% and collapse all those crazy slabs into one where the books with 0 hai, edtech with 18 hai, like somebody is selling edtech, classifying it as books, and all those crazy things go away. So just have a simpler, low rate GST rate that is easy to comply with. So yeah, but I see one question by Debjani Ray, and I'm very tempted to answer that question. She's asking, do we, the teachers,
please go ahead,
as consumers / customers? I do think that teachers need to treat their students as their customers. And see, customer is not somebody who pays. Customer is actually somebody who you pray to every morning. So customer is your God. When you respect your customer like a God and you start your day by praying to your customers, you treat your customers properly. At the end of the day, they might pay you $1 bill. That's okay. But when you say customer, the customer is not defined by somebody who pays you. Customer is defined by the reason for your existence, right? The teacher only exists if there is a student. Without a student, there's no teacher. So you need to start praying to your students every morning and not the other way around, right? So I think
slightly different. Slightly different take on that one.
Can I respond or Ramya, go ahead?
Ramya, go ahead. Ramya, go ahead.
Sorry, slightly different take on that one. So the way I see it is that the dynamic between a teacher and a student becomes automatically smoothened when the teacher comes with great competencies. Because when the teacher comes with those competencies, the student is automatically respecting the teacher because the teacher is making a difference, and the teacher is automatically confident. And when you are automatically confident, you also don't tell your student, okay, please keep quiet, don't ask a question, etc., etc. Rather, you say, please ask. Please ask, let's discuss it together. So that dynamic becomes smooth when the teacher comes with great competencies. Now, when the teacher doesn't come with those great competencies, then automatically the dynamic becomes rough. So on one hand, the student is saying, oh, this teacher is not delivering, or the parent is saying that, the teacher is saying, oh, are you my customer? Why should I be, shouldn't you be respecting me? But then, why should you respect if the competency is not there? You're not able to understand the subject. So for me, the heart of all this is not a theoretical debate on who is the customer or, who should respect whom, etc., etc. I think with great competencies, while we are not in that where we are looking at all that, but we have a culture easily depends on.
I think Ramya has a bit of a bad connection. We anyway have 2 minutes left. If I can, maybe Ramya will.
Sorry.
Ramya, it's okay. We have 2 minutes left. I want to make sure we end on time. This has been a long day. A question to Zishan, Saumil, and Ramya, all three of you, but please take like 30 seconds or not more. If you were to advise or fund a new edtech business or education sector business, what white space would you advise an entrepreneur to launch that business into? Quick 30 seconds, please, each one of you. Start with Zishan.
So right now I'm very bullish on unifying the in-school, after-school space. So anything that is helping unify in-school and after-school space, I think the next decade is for that space.
Excellent. Entrepreneurs, please note all of this because these guys will definitely fund you if you launch some business in this area. So make a note. Saumil, do you want to go next?
Sure. For me, and I guess my actions are showing it in terms of what I believe are the big phrases, learning through play. You can call it gamification in a different way, but learning through play is a big opportunity. And that then goes across in school and after school and kind of putting it all together.
Excellent. Ramya, quick thought.
Yeah, sorry, my network is bad, but very quick thought. I would love to actually fund a business related. And I can't fund, but let me say I would love to see a business related to getting the whole personalized pathways in secondary and senior secondary going. Again, in a very integrated manner between school and after school, as Zishan said.
Excellent. This was very good. Short in 30 seconds. They were actually very clear ideas. Really appreciate that. We're out of time or almost out of time. Really want to thank all of my fellow panelists, Saumil, Zishan, Ramya, and Loveleen, I think dropped out. But this was a fascinating discussion. Really enjoyed it. I hope the audience did as well. Rohit, can I throw this back at you?
Thank you, Manish.
Thank you, Manish. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
Manish.
you all the panelists for taking time. I just go back to the time when I started an edtech company in 2011, but we tried to solve a problem which was too small, to get MBA students employable, and I guess nobody wanted that. But so now I take back a lot of lessons personally from all of you. And thank you so much for taking time on a weekend to be part of this panel. Thank you very much, and have a great day. Thank you. Bye.
Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Manish. Thanks, Rohit.